Hey, it's Wilfer. So Netflix has been under fire over the past week for their children's programming, with many critics arguing that the growing emphasis on diversity in animated shows for young viewers has crossed the line, particularly when it comes to gender ideology. As a result, the reputation and financial stability of the corporate giant have had to suffer the consequences, with high-profile voices like Elon Musk calling for boycotting Netflix. The company has lost billions of dollars in market value, but will this be enough for them to get the message? Let's talk about it.
It's me. I'm trans, Norma.
Welcome to your crash course in holiday self-expression.
You look amazing! As a transberry, I love living out loud as my most authentic self.
Netflix built its empire by offering compelling stories, from binge-worthy dramas to family-friendly animations. The platform has become synonymous with accessibility, variety, and creative freedom, but recently it seems that some of its content, especially the one targeting children, has shifted into what many have now called ideological grooming. Take, for instance, shows like Dead End Paranormal Park or The Babysitter's Club. Both feature transgender characters in central roles. And while diverse characters in show for adults can sometimes feel jarring if they appear included solely to meet a quota, we as adults have the capacity to interpret and make sense of what we're seeing based on our own established principles. And if we don't like it, we can just tune it out. But for very young children, the question is different. Do they need exposure to complex social debates about gender identity before they even understand the basics of themselves and the world? For the majority of parents, the answer to that would be no. And that's why a lot of people have been canceling their Netflix subscriptions to send a message that they will no longer support these types of insertions. Children's brains are very much in development. Between the ages of 3 and 5, kids are just starting to learn about relationships and basic social norms. And psychologists often point out that children learn primarily through imitation. They absorb what they see long before they can rationalize it, so when complex adult issues are presented through colorful, friendly characters, kids don't debate or analyze, they internalize. A 5-year-old doesn't distinguish between social debate and moral truth. Everything on the screen feels authoritative. That's why introducing adult concepts too early isn't neutral. It actively shapes how children form identity, belonging, and moral order. So political and ideological concepts introduced at this stage risk creating a lot of confusion or shape a certain identity before a child has the cognitive tools to process it. When a character in a show is effectively teaching kids how to correct others on gender identity, it crosses into the territory of instruction rather than storytelling. Entertainment should remain first and foremost entertainment. Kids should be able to enjoy a story simply for the story itself, with basic universal themes of adventure, friendship, age-appropriate problem solving, without it doubling as a lesson in contemporary ideology. Parents should have the space to introduce these topics when they feel the child is ready in the context of their own family values and discussions. But when shows mix entertainment and instruction in this way, the line between story and messaging becomes blurred, and people are increasingly becoming more reactive to this type of thing. Now, Netflix's problem is not unique. Other major media players have faced comparable backlash around LGBT content, particularly when it enters youth or family spaces. Disney was faced with similar critiques when they introduced an openly trans character in the Pixar series Win or Lose. Parents were outraged, and once they pushed back, while the character did remain in the show, explicit references to being trans or gender identity dialogue was taken out. Disney justified this move as a concession to sensitivities around how children process gender topics, arguing that such conversations are better guided by parents. You don't say. Unlike Disney, however, Netflix seems to be doubling down, and to some, that is unsurprising. You see, for Netflix, it's not just a matter of vetting content and making choices based on audiences' reactions. The diversity reflected on screen is also part of their internal culture. For several years now, they've been releasing what they call the quote-unquote inclusion and diversity reports, and the most recent one shows an increase in creators, writers, and lead actors from underrepresented racial and ethnic groups. And I can't believe this even has to be explained, but the problem with this is that emphasizing identity over qualifications or experience creates unintended consequences, including a perception that content is being selected based on which identity fits better or scores more points rather than the quality of storytelling. When you hire based on factors other than qualification, you shift the focus away from talent, creativity, good storytelling, and merit becomes secondary. That doesn't serve the creators or the audience. The conversation then stops being about who told the best story or delivered the strongest performance, and instead becomes about meeting demographic targets, because audiences start questioning whether someone was hired for their skill or to fill a quota. And it looks like Netflix, like other corporations before them, have adopted what people often refer to as a woke agenda, prioritizing social signaling over audience engagement or even profitability. We've seen this with Bud Light, Jaguar, and other brands that took the woke route, which has created a real tension among their customers. Go woke, go broke. Bud Light's marketing misstep wasn't just about one influencer partnership, it was a terrible misread of the brand's core audience. Jaguar's similar attempt to push progressive messaging into its luxury branding fell flat because customers had no desire to be preached to about gender identity politics. For Netflix, discussions opposing their trans animated characters had been going on online for several weeks, but it wasn't until Elon Musk posted on X urging people to cancel their subscriptions that the topic was thrust into the mainstream. Netflix stock has since plummeted, wiping off billions of dollars in valuation as a result. Now, as a commercial corporation, Netflix, I guess, has the right to define its content and corporate culture. They can burn themselves to the ground if they want to, but when entertainment content, hiring practices, and messaging all converge around ideology, the result is alienating the very audience that built the company's success. And investors are not blind to culture. The steep drop in market cap reflects the cultural backlash now registers as financial risk. That puts internal pressure on Netflix, not just from consumers, but from those who supply the capital as well. Until they understand that their role is not to educate but to entertain, Netflix will continue to have a bumpy road ahead. Which brings us to the final and perhaps most important point. The role of educating children belongs solely to their parents. And it's tempting to think of platforms like Netflix as neutral sources of learning, but they are not. Streaming services are commercial enterprises designed to maximize engagement and ultimately profit. They have no authority in education. Not corporations, not governments, but parents are best positioned to introduce children to values, ethics, and identity concepts in a safe and controlled way. A parent understands their child's temperament, maturity level, and family context. Parents can explain nuances, answer questions, and provide guidance that a show, however well-intentioned they may claim to be, cannot. And I would take this point even further, because beyond the ideological debates, there is a deeper, evidence-based concern that often gets lost in the noise. Young children should not even be watching television at all, regardless of the message, until at least the age of 5. Decades of research from institutions like the American Academy of Pediatrics, the World Health Organization, and the Harvard Center on the Developing Child show that early exposure to screens is linked to delayed speech development, reduced attention span, impaired emotional regulation, or disrupted sleep cycles. Screens overstimulate the developing brain's reward centers, while displacing the real-world sensory experiences children need to build language, empathy, and self-control. Of course, this sounds idealistic, and modern reality complicates things. Parents are working longer hours, often juggling 2 incomes just to stay afloat. And for many households, handing a child a screen for a short moment of calm feels like the only viable option. This doesn't make the parents negligent, it makes them human. But even when occasional screen time is unavoidable, parents should make the effort to limit exposure and, most importantly, preview any content before showing it to the children. Because as we can all see, you can never know what they're gonna find in there. No algorithm or streaming service, certainly not one as politicized as Netflix, should act as a substitute for parental judgment. The backlash against Netflix isn't an isolated outburst. It's a symptom of something bigger. People have grown weary of corporations using their children as a stage for political posturing. Markets move where people move. And right now, the public is shifting its loyalty to platforms that respect boundaries and prioritize storytelling over ideology. And no amount of PR spin or inclusion reports can replace that.